Hi everyone, welcome to the Gamasutra Twitch channel. My name is Bryant Francis, your mysterious invisible voice hanging out in the corner of your ears. That's not a phrase, I just made that up. I'm a contributing editor at Gamasutra, and I'm joined by one of my fellow Gamasutra editors in the bottom left-hand corner. Alex, could you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, good morning. I'm definitely awake. We are all wide awake. My name is Alex Waro. I'm an editor, Gamasutra.com, and I am very pleased that today we are joined by two, not one, but two very special guests. Gentlemen, could you please tell our fine audience who you are and what you do?
My name is Scott Jr. I'm the executive producer for Secret World Legends, and this is...
I'm Romain Amiel. I'm the game director on Secret World Legends.
Brian, are you playing Secret World Legends right now?
I am. I just want to quickly give a shout out to the fine folks at Funcom and thank them for co-hosting this stream. If you're watching, we would like to invite you to ask questions in the Gamasutra Twitch chat channel, where we will be reading them for our guests. If you have any questions about running an MMO, about the Secret World Legends reboot, please ask them, and we will try to get you answers. To start off, so the Secret World actually came out in 2012. It's not 2012. Kind of wish it was. It's 2017. Could you tell us why you all have rebooted this game as Secret World Legends, and what are sort of the things we should be keeping an eye on today as we play this MMORPG?
Sure. So we're super proud of what we did with the Secret World back in 2012. Romain and I both worked on the project. We were there when it launched. We were pretty ambitious with a few of the things that we did, though. And, super proud of the quest design, the content of the game. However, we were probably a little bit too ambitious, and we reached a little bit too far on some things like the level-less system, the horizontal progression, the no-class systems. So there's a lot of unfamiliar things when you're playing the Secret World. So what we wanted to do with Secret World Legends was make it free to play, because we had been planning to do that for quite a while. We wanted to keep the best aspects of it, and then we wanted to make the rest of it a little bit more traditional and approachable for people, so that you're not so overwhelmed with all these different things. Yeah, and that's it sort of in a nutshell. If you want to add anything?
Yeah, pretty much. I think it's one of the main things that we did wrong, I want to say, is we broke the rule of design, which is to not innovate more than 25% of a new game. And then we were like, hey, screw that rule. We'll innovate on everything. And he ended up with a game, as Scott said, with a great story. That was always meant to be the key points, but then we did too many other things that distracted people, that confused people. So we wanted to learn from our mistake, focus on the thing that we do really well, and then for the rest, trying to make the game a bit more approachable.
I think that's super interesting, and it's kind of bittersweet for me. I haven't played since the reboot, but I used to play back in the day a little bit when Secret World came out, and I think I kind of want to dig into what it is you think about the level-less progression system that was off-putting and difficult for people to grasp. Because from the outside, I always thought the idea that there were no codified levels, there was a very soft leveling system where players could just kind of level up their own abilities at their own pace was really interesting and unique. But it sounds like maybe it sort of pushed a lot of people away, or sort of was hard to approach.
It did two things, really. One is that people weren't sure where they were in the progression, because even though we talked about the Secret World, it's being flat, there's horizontal progression, there still was some vertical progression in the back. But since we committed to be levelless, we sort of had to hide these things and try to, I don't know what the proper term is, but not only did it make it confusing for players, it also limited what our designers could do. So as you're approaching things, and when you're making a game, you have this toolbox, and levels and classes are one of, your tools that you use to make the game. And we sort of took those away. And so it just made it hard for people to know where they should be. Should I be fighting zombies in Kingsmith right now, or should I be fighting vampires in Transylvania. There's no classes, there's no levels. What do I do? And so we had a really hard time directing people. We saw people really enjoyed, when they got into Kingston Town for the first time, they're playing through the story. It's more of the beginner content. However, as they get farther and farther and the game starts asking more and more of them, they weren't sure how to tackle those things. So by the time they get to the third playfield, suddenly, a lot of people are overwhelmed, and we just saw a drastic cutoff in numbers as far as player population goes.
A lot of people start saying like the game is too hard, and when you realize it's not really the game that became too hard, it's more that your character became too weak because you didn't progress in the way we expected you to, because there was too much freedom. So we really allowed people to make mistakes, and they only saw really those repercussions way too late in the game. Of course, it's not something which is, the fact that we decided to fix those mistakes, they're not really mistakes, they were like a design choice. That we embraced, and that several people enjoyed as well. Like that's what made it difficult. Of course, all of us here were used to it, and a lot of people who stick to the game enjoyed it. But we had to pay attention to those numbers that we had showing that people were quitting. Like a lot of people were saying, "I really want to follow the game because I want to know more about that story, but I can't play it." And then looking at just on the level thing, just to reiterate on what Scott said, it's true that the game ultimately still had levels, like the monsters you find in the first playfield compared to the monsters you find in the last playfield were much easier. Like, they do progress. We expect you to get your character get stronger. So ultimately we did have levels in some ways. So like, let's just, show it to players so they have a point of reference.
Yeah, totally. You okay there, Brian?
Just dealing with some stuff.
A lot of draw.
That's like a lot of mudmen or whatever. What are those guys?
Yeah, you might want to run.
Yeah.
I get a huge potion already, so.
I think it's
a zombie.
There's like a lot to dig in there, right? The idea that you built this game with the clear intent of giving players room, space, both systems wise and in the actual geometry wise to like play for a long time. And then, like trying to match up what is on its surface a very open leveling system, but is in fact still a progression system with a very like codified like playfield layout, where like if you go here you're gonna die, if you go here you're not gonna die. But something I want to like really jump into now that Brian is safe is God. I'm watching him like run and dodge and jump around. I don't remember that being the case when I played 5 years ago. Is that part of the overhaul, like, or was that always there? That kind of like fast shooting.
So yeah, we kind of changed the combat a little bit to be faster, to be more action based. The dodging has always been there, but again wasn't really taught properly. So this is part of the first impression of the game. Like, we're trying to teach you the systems better. We got stronger tutorials. We're teaching you all of those things. We revamped the UI as well to give you better feedback on the thing that you can and cannot do. But ultimately on the combat, we made the combat faster. We changed to a reticule mode, as you can see right now. So it helps a lot getting more immersed into the character. It's easier to pick up as well compared to the more traditional combat system we used to have, which was more like, tap targeting and very MMO-esque.
Mm-hmm. Was it based on the Age of Conan combat? Or am I making that up back in the day?
No, Age of Conan was still tab targeting in a sense. I mean,
you could dodge. I remember, yeah.
You could, yeah. And we had in TSW, or the Secret World, still had the dodging that he's doing right here. It's just that you had to hold down the right mouse button, and right now you don't need to do that anymore. You're always aiming, so there's no more tab to select. You need to actually hover over stuff to attack it.
But it was very MMO-esque, like this system, which all MMOs have, that you tap to target your target and then use abilities. It's something that all MMO players find very instinctive, but if you don't play MMOs, it's actually something which is completely unique to those games. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And given that we were trying to appeal as well to an audience who's going to be more familiar to RPGs, it came into this idea of going into a combat system that was, again, easier to get into. And right now it's just, look at what you want to shoot, click your mouse and you shoot it. Yeah. It's very, very... it's very easy to get into, and it's very interesting to see actually a lot of our players, more of the Secret World hardcore players who were very reticent into seeing those change, are now coming around and saying actually it does help. I'm having more fun with combat. it feels better and it looks better too. So
And shout out to all of the TSW people that helped us on beta, because they gave a ton of feedback on the reticle system, and it would not be nearly as good today if it wasn't for those guys.
absolutely.
Yeah.
The Drunken Reaper says that some of the before they thought that there was too much busy work in the older version, that the boss fights were overtuned. This is kind of hearing you all talk about this to me is a little wild, because I know game developers are often the first people to sort of admit, we did something wrong, we need to fix this, but often they have to do that, very early in the process, or it's very hard to correct later on.
Sure, yeah.
How did it feel to sort of you're working on a game, I'm presuming this change was made at least a year to 2 years ago because of how long it takes to make these kind of changes. How does it feel to sort of go for 3 years with these core systems implementing one way, and to sit there and just look at your past work and go, this isn't good enough, and now we need to make dramatic changes for it?
Yeah, so we started heavy development on this in January, actually. So we did quite a lot in a very short amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
We started the redesign about a year ago. Got everything, what we wanted to do, had a very small team start working on prototypes. But yeah, the heavy work of this actually started in January, I would say. That's when we moved basically 100% of our team here in the US office onto it. But to go back a little bit, it's hard to do changes this late, and that's sort of why we did a reboot. So starting in 2012, every MMO has very small changes, and you'd call them band-aids, really, that you're putting on. It's like, this is a problem, we need to fix it here. Well, we're restricted by this mechanic. Let's patch it and do something that gets us there. And that's what. Those aren't always very good solutions either. It's more like working with what you have instead of sitting down, drilling down into what the real problem is and redesigning it from the ground up. So that's what the reboot allowed us to do. And that's why it needed to start on a new server, because we completely changed so much of the game, like progression-wise and content-wise, that people had to start over fresh.
If you can, I really want to dig into the nuts and bolts of MMO combat and what you think is valuable about it, right? Because I think this is like kind of a weird, I don't want to say like niche. I mean, millions of people play MMO games around the world, but like designing combat encounters for spaces like this is kind of a rare art in game design. And I wonder, as you guys were sort of tweaking and adjusting and changing things for the reboot, what is it that you think is important about MMO combat encounters that you wanted to preserve? Like what is the core that you're trying to achieve when you design the systems and the mob placement and that kind of thing?
I mean, ultimately we want it to be fun, right? It's always like the search of any game. I think one of the main things we wanted to keep with the reboot is this idea that we want it to be that modern game where you get to build a class of your own and play really the way you want to play. So you get to try out several weapons, and you get to find two weapons who feel good together, honestly, synergize well together, but it's more about how you feel, how they play. So this was one of the vision of TSW, and when we decided to revamp that combat, we wanted to keep this as a core. And of course, you're going to tell me about you've added classes. And we didn't really add classes. We added a tutorial that lets people get an impression of how certain weapons are going to work together. So we do like some kind of the work we expected people to do originally. We do it for you. We give you this kind of feedback into saying, hey, this is how those two weapons are going to work together. Like you're going to be better at healing, better at tanking, better at DPSing, what we call the Holy Trinity. And these are the weapons. This is what they do. But ultimately, after we've given you that push into the game, we let you experiment with all of the other weapons and find something which is going to be truly your character. It's about that character immersion and feeling that you're part of this world and you're making a badass hero.
Yeah, and please forgive me. Like I'm sort of stumbling in the dark here. What I'm trying to get at is sort of hard for me to describe. But like there is a unique rhythm to combat in most massively multiplayer online games, and despite the reboot, which I'm sure has involved a lot of tweaks and changes and significant like balancing, what I'm seeing Bryant do here is it's well within that rhythm, right? He kind of moves forward into an enemy's radius. He pulls the enemy. He works through his abilities, puts a couple bullets into them or whatever, and he drops. He loots them, and then the rhythm continues. So like, how do you know when that rhythm is good? Basically, as a designer, when you're putting these encounters together and like laying out these creatures.
I think feedback is the biggest thing. So, when you start out, you have so many tools that you can use. So you have movement, you have aiming, you have damage over time abilities, you have ground targeted AoEs, you have point blank AoEs, you have snares, you have roots, you have cleanse, barriers, whatever. So these are all your toolboxes. And then when you're designing a monster, you want to be like, this monster is good against these tools and weak against these tools. So I want the player to have to figure that out. So when you run up and hit somebody with your hammer and he starts growling and then he explodes and kills you, and you're like, oh, maybe I should attack him from ranged instead. Or maybe I should have something to interrupt that growl ability. And so I don't know if it's MMOs specifically or just RPGs where your character has abilities, and so you need to figure out how give the player the toolbox, let him come into unique challenges, and that's what's really neat about RPGs a lot is just figuring out the encounters that the designers have made and figuring out how to solve these challenges in real-time combat. So it's sort of like a puzzle.
Knowing when it feels good is in the eye of the beholder, really. Like, our job here is more to give as many of these tools to the players so they can actually build that class that feels good to them. Some people will prefer smacking things with the hammer, and some people will prefer zapping things as well with electrical bolts. So it's a matter of us like giving that variation that will allow players to identify with that character, and then making sure that then it goes back into the whole balance, making sure that all of these spells work, that you don't end up making, hammer does the most damage, so everybody's going to play hammer if you're more of a min-maxer type of players. But yeah, the creation of the toolbox is the important part. Afterwards, when it comes to making it feel good, for us, what we tweaked a lot was really the time that you spend in combat. We started realizing that the longer you were fighting a zombie that was too resilient, that it would take like 20 seconds to fight, you would end up being tired, doing the same motion, the same rhythm. It was more fun going from pack of zombies to pack of zombies. So we decided to reduce that time to kill, to make that combat again feel more actiony and getting this kind of a feel that we wanted. But yeah, there was a lot of iterative process into getting that feel of packs, like he's doing right now, like fighting
that was fun.
8 monsters at the same time. And
I gotta say I spent a lot of time with World of Warcraft, and the amount of time you spend fighting groups of enemies in this game, it feels different, and you're sort of like tuning your choices based on whether it's a group or whether it's one guy right here who I can just sort of keep putting bullets into. Now, I see we have a lot of people joining us in the chat, probably from the TSW Facebook page. Thank you all for joining us. Just want to remind you can ask questions of our guests here, and they will gladly answer them for you, hopefully. We will relay them. I do want to point out that one commentator is saying they didn't mind having to start fresh despite being endgame in TSW. That commentator is called Sane. How did you account for, trying to make sure your endgame players wouldn't feel too slighted by making this kind of big change in their stuff?
That was a really hard decision. So I think I've talked about it in a couple interviews, but basically we had decided quite a while ago that we wanted to go free to play. And as you brought up earlier, it's like how can you make these huge changes this far into development? And basically rebooting was what allowed us to do a lot of this stuff. So we basically sat down, we thought of what are we able to do to make the game great? That's what was our main goals. Like, how can we get this story out to as many people? How can we get the cool quest design out to as many people? And so we went through and we looked at every single feature we could change and all the changes we could make. And then we looked at how we could actually do that. And, rebooting and setting everybody to a fresh start was one of the ways to achieve that. And so we looked at the pros and cons of each situation. And then when we finally landed on, all right, let's make this a brand new fresh start server. We'll change the name, we'll change the business model. Then we had to think of, well, how can we make our previous customers, that have the player base that have supported us these last 5 years, how can we reward them from that? And so we allowed people to transfer their clothing over and some other things. We gave them some bonuses. So your membership in the Secret World carried over to Secret World Legends. All your clothing items carried over. There's some other stuff too.
There is a question in the chat that I'm just going to throw out real quick.
Yeah.
I just had one
ahead.
extra thing on this one. I think one of the main things for us was to not limit ourselves. Like, we really wanted to do everything which was for the greatest benefit of the game. And as Scott mentioned earlier, it's one of the worst things you can do is to kind of designing yourself into a corner. Like, we wanted to try and do everything to give the designers the tools to progress the game, to make everything as good as possible, to better combat. And if you have to have the limitation of saying we need at the same time to allow people to carry over everything, then you end up having the same band-aid system into saying, like, we cannot just revamp everything. We're going to have to keep a part of the core. And this one ended up into saying, okay, we'll focus on the game first, make sure the game is as good as possible for everybody, and then based on what we have, we'll see everything that we can do to say thank you to all the people who have supported the Secret World for 5 years.
Nice.
Which ended up being a lot of vanity and
It's all about vanity items. So Shadom in chat, this person believes that maybe the curve right now when you level the blue item versus leveling a purple item is, in their opinion, a little unfair and unfun. So they want to know, can you answer whether item progression will be smoothed out as higher level content comes out? And then, for a general audience, we love to know, like what do you think about when you're balancing things like item progression in a long-term game like this?
Yeah, so we have a lot of item progression right now, but since the game is early, it's not actually required that much for a lot of the challenges that are in the game. So we one of our goals was to have vertical progression, to have a lot of it, and to allow, really, whenever you do something, to make sure your character is becoming more powerful. And in order to achieve that, you need to make sure that it takes a while to reach max level, which is an insane amount of time right now. Probably, I shouldn't say insane, but it's a lot of time. But you don't need to be there in order to complete any of the content right now. You don't. So red gear is the highest gear in the game. It's not required for any of the content in the game right now, though. But as far as purple gear goes, you need to start having purple gear when you're done with the story and when you're entering like group encounters. But yeah, we'll be looking at the amount of time it takes to progress. We'll be looking at people's play styles, and we'll be adjusting them. So that'll probably start happening sometime in August after Steam launch.
Nice.
But
So go ahead, sorry.
The focus is on the story. So on the progression, I think there's usually this kind of bad feeling when you feel your character is maxed out, and all your gear is the best, and you don't really have a reason to keep playing the game. We wanted to avoid this. We wanted to make sure there was always a way for you to get stronger. So this is why the progression is so huge and is almost infinite, because you will always get stronger the longer you play. But as we start adding content, your character will just naturally progress through all of that.
Yeah, I mean, you basically anticipated my question there, which is like, if you like, how do you keep a game like this interesting and engaging to an audience once they've sort of tapped out? Like, once you get to the top, like, like the standard answer I think is raids and multiplayer encounters and that kind of thing. But it seems like Secret World takes a slightly different tack. So I want to know, like, what do you prioritize when trying to keep your players satisfied at the top levels?
Yeah, so we have a roadmap that we've published that shows out what we're going to be. If you go to secretworldlegends.com, I think it's right at the very top. It says roadmap. And it's a mixture of we call them systems or content. Or story, I guess you would say. So that's really what you do, because you have, people generally fall into one of two pools: is they like to be stronger, or they like to experience a story, or they're somewhere in between that. So what we plan to do is make more stories, expand the universe, tell the rest of the story. We have quite a bit from the original launch that Ragnar and Joel and all the writers for TSW back in 2011 or 2012, where they had this grand idea of what this universe is and where the players would eventually go. So we still have that for quite a while to work on. And then we have systems challenges. So we have new dungeon type things, new hardcore encounters for people. And really, that's the how you retain customers is more content, something new and fresh to do.
Yeah, that seems like a solid goal. I have questions, but I should scroll back here in the chat real quick before it goes off screen. Tanico9 has a question: whether it was planned to remove the Agarthan caches from drops prior to your Steam launch, or was there going to be a monthly cache change at this point? I don't know what they're getting at. Could you maybe shed a little bit of light on that for our audience?
Sure. So every 4 or 5 weeks, we plan to release a new cache, which is a Dropbox. So when you get further into the game, or loot box, I guess, as you get further into the game, these start dropping from mobs. They have special items and rare things. And those will be cycled out like I said, every 5 or 6 weeks, just depending. So it was originally planned to go out with Steam launch, but since we had to patch some stuff earlier for some testing, it came out a little bit early. We are launching on Steam on Monday, though.
Nice. So as designers and producers, like, how do you decide upon that cadence of release, right? Like how do you come to a timetable of, every 4 to 5 weeks we're going to put this out? Like, why not why not more often? Why not like once every 3 months? What is it about that thing that's such a ideal time frame?
So with the lockboxes specifically, they're timed to, they have a limited amount of rewards in them. So we don't want them to be around for like a year, or there's no reason to keep on opening them, essentially. And we want to introduce new clothing, new pets, new mounts, new ways for people to make their characters unique in appearance. But it also takes time to make those. So we can't make them every week, for example. Like in another game where it's, a new champion or a new skin would come out, every few months. It's, similar to the same amount of work. The caches have unique weapons in them. They have unique mounts and pets and visuals. So it takes a while for the artists and the design team to make those.
A lot of vanity. I mean, it's all about the time expectation. Making sure we recycle them before they get too old to the players. And then there's also adaptation. Obviously, like we want to see it's the first time that we do this, so we felt like 5 to 6 weeks was a good time. But we'll adapt based on player feedback, etc. Like that's the beauty of playing on a game with live is you get this feedback constantly, which allows us to find the correct cycle that would satisfy most of the customers.
I want to talk about, if you're up for it, why your careers as game developers, right? Like first of all, I'd love to know quickly, like how long have both of you been at Funcom, and sort of like what has your career looked like prior to that? Have you always been in online games? Did you work elsewhere before here? What's your experience look like?
So I started at Funcom a long time ago, 16 years ago. So right when Anarchy Online launched. So
nice. Which
was our first MMO. So I've been, as far as video games go, so I started right out of college, and I've always been on online games.
I have a little bit of different background. I started working in genetics in a lab. So my background is in biology. But I went for a complete different side. I was playing video games a lot. Like, my girlfriend was like, well, you play too much video games. You don't like working in a lab. How about you try to do something out of it? So started working as a tester originally, 15 years ago for a different company. And then from there, I kind of got a designer who thought I had a knack for it, trained me as a designer. And then I joined Funcom 10 years ago as a designer on Age of Conan. And then worked from there as becoming lead, gameplay designer, focusing on gameplay in general into the feel of the game. And then moved to TSW 6 years ago. 7 years ago, actually. And
nice. So, first of all, that biology background is super interesting. How, if at all, has that influenced the way you design and develop games?
I think it influenced the way I think. Trying to keep things realistic, trying to keep the idea of, does that make sense or does it not? I think it's usually my biggest fear. Like getting into like, I've worked with Joel, so the previous game director, a lot. Like we've been working as a pair for the longest time, and it always came from the idea that Joel had a good idea on how like a story he wanted to tell, but not how to play it. And this is where my strength really came into saying like, okay, this is what we're trying to transmit. This is what we want the players to do. So always thinking this idea of, this is like, again, those rule of design, you never think about what you want the boss to do. You think about what you want the players to do to the boss. So trying to take this into a storytelling type of thing, like this is how we want the players to expand that story. This is where we want them to be surprised. This is where we want them to be scared, to feel rewarded and getting this idea of getting the gameplay. So I think having a better understanding on how, like life works and cells work together, give this kind of idea of cohesion, how familiar things become to try and recreate in a digital way, something that will feel familiar to a player.
Mm. So like this is just my own experience, but anecdotally, like, and talking to a bunch of different game developers of all stripes, all different sizes of studios all around the world, when I talk to developers that work on massively multiplayer games, they typically have been at their studio for a really long time. Not in a bad way. Just like they're committed. They've been there before. They have history there, and they've been working on big online games for a very long time. They haven't been jumping around to mobile or to indie or anything else. So I kind of want to know what it is that attracts you guys to games like this. Why do you spend so much of your career working on big, massive, singular projects like this?
For me, it goes back to like when EverQuest launched. So I was in college, EverQuest came out, and that's all I played. I just stopped playing every other game, and I just played EverQuest nonstop.
Sure.
And it just really consumed me. The social aspect of the game, the building your name, like in actually being somebody, like in a game that never really happened before. I mean, there have been other, Ultima Online and other games like that. But yeah, EverQuest just really spoke to me. And so I decided I want to make games like that. So yeah, and that's what I've been doing. And I guess that sort of answers it. It's just the
totally.
other MMOs. Like, I love MMOs. I play all of them as they come out. Some of them I like, some of them I dislike. I like seeing how other designers tackle the same problems we're having. Seeing if we can, be inspired by what they're doing and applying it to our games.
It's the exact same thing for me, and funnily enough, EverQuest is the culprit too. I think it was for me like the discovery of like being a gamer for so long. The discovery that there was more to video game. There could also be like just an online world who's there waiting. Like even if you're not playing, it's still going. Really opened my eyes into what it could be to live a different reality, like really actually escape your everyday life and then do something that you feel proud of, and go and have a beer in a tavern somewhere and then go with your friend to fight a dragon. I was like, wow, that's amazing. You can actually do that. And I think the reason why we stay on this game for so long afterwards, when we get the chance of working on them, is that passion. It's just we believe in this world. It's a lot more like the world is the game is never finished. It's like the first thing that we do is we set a world together, we set a set of rules, and then there's so many things that can happen in this game that it's exciting for us to explore as designers, and it's also exciting to be able to react again to the demands of your players. They're like, the players always end up knowing the game a lot more than you do, almost, because we have to work, we can't just play it all the time ourselves. So they end up creating their own stories, creating their own world that you want to explore, that you get inspired by as a designer, and then so it's really passion, I think.
Also,
and go ahead. Sorry.
The development cycle on an MMO is massive compared to a lot of games. I mean, some games take forever to make. I won't name any culprits, but they've just been around forever. But like working on an MMO is basically that's your career. So you go through the development of it, which is anywhere between 2 and 4 years, sometimes longer, and then you work on the live development team, which is a completely different experience. So yeah, you can easily work on a game 10 years if you're working on an MMO, or even longer.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit different than, if you're working on a shooter or something like that. You work on it for a while, it comes out, it launches. Now it's a little bit different, because like they have live environments compared to back in the day. But,
Right. Yeah. So like that's kind of where I'm hoping to lead this is, I think massively multiplayer online games are still a huge genre around the world. But I think if you're not into that scene, like them, just like if you're not really into like itch games, or you're not really into mobile games, like if you're not into it, you don't really play them at all, because they are best when you can put a lot of time into them, right? So I think like a lot of designers are now finding themselves working on games that are live and updated for years and years and years, but like they're maybe not like super up on what's going on in the MMO game space. And so I wonder, with your guys' experience, like what kind of advice would you give to other developers who are maybe finding themselves in a situation where they are like maintaining a community, updating a game every week or every month for years on end, and it's sort of a new challenge for them? Like what would be your, like, this is so broad, what is your like big takeaway given your significant experience at Funcom?
I just think sometimes it's hard too, but engaging with your community as much as possible. Some people can be toxic, some people can, be very mean to you, but then there's the other thing where, they love the game, and that's why they're so passionate about it, and that's why they hate you at the moment, because you nerfed their favorite class, because they had spent 2 years of their life working on something and you took it away from them, or you changed it, so but engaging the community, and being a part of it when you can. The unfortunate thing is that you can't do that all the time, because there's so much work to do. So, but yeah, listening to community, engaging with them, looking at the data and getting involved in like the analytics and seeing how people are playing your game is all really, really important.
I think also keep in mind what it is that you like as a player. Take yourself as a player almost before yourself as a developer. You need to understand those games fundamentally, in order to be able to do a good job. And then, if you like storytelling, it's almost a bad example, but there's a lot of a game who focus on storytelling. We just have one story to tell, and the story is finished. And then you get this change of starting fresh. Go with the newer technology and then give a different story. That's also something which is very, very attractive to a lot of developers. So it's maybe better to work on a different title that you can just, you don't have to update afterwards. It's launched, it's done. You can start doing something else. While you're working on this title, you can get yourself a lot of ideas of things that you could do later. So, if it's what you want to do, just go ahead with that. But if what you prefer is this idea that what you want to do is to create a world and keep expanding on that world to a limitless event, then maybe like those kind of online games, whether they are MMOs or constantly updated games, might be more your field. It's really just, follow your heart. It should be
Yeah, I wonder, Scott, you mentioned there's a little bit of like toxicity you have to deal with, and I think that's a common thread for a lot of developers. And I think it's like really interesting to dig into, even if it's maybe an old topic, because I mean you're human beings. Your players are human beings. If you guys met each other on the street, I'm sure everyone would be cordial and friendly and nice. But there's all these systems between you sometimes. There's forums, there's Twitter, there's this game, this big sprawling thing you're constantly making and tweaking. So I kind of want to know, like, how do you, as a professional, sort of, how do you guys deal with the ups and downs of community management? How do you, as human beings, like, sort of handle that? If it gets toxic, like, how do you approach that, and how do you deal with it in a professional sense?
Real quick, before you answer that, I'm going to interrupt you and also like slightly like put a higher note on Alex's question, in that TCO TSW, who's been hanging out in the chat, just wanted to say that the story about how long you both have been working on the game kind of got to them. For them, TSW has been about 7 years of their life as well. They're enjoying Secret World, Legends, and do want to send some love your way. So just wanted to throw that out to help make, because maybe that's part of the answer, but I just wanted to get that on stream before you all dove into what I'm sure will be a great answer.
Sure. Uh, it's hard. I mean, when you look at some of the bigger studios, like Riot has done some really, really interesting uh, analysis of like toxicity, and they have people that are far more educated and qualified to talk about this than I am. But if you look at it on a personal level, you just have to realize, it's the whole like put yourself in their shoes and try to find out where they're coming from. So, I play games. I play, MMOs, and like I said before, if something bad happens to me, I can get upset, and then
Who does? Hi.
I do get upset, sure. But yeah, I mean, if somebody's trolling you or they're yelling at you on the internet, you just have to try to take away what they're really saying. Like, what has made them mad? What have you done that has really caused this person to be upset? And maybe there's some positives you can actually take from that. I don't always necessarily talk to people that are getting really toxic, but I still do try to read it as much as possible, unless they're just trolling, obviously. But yeah, just take it into account when you're making future decisions. Put it on like a con of like when we're evaluating what we've done, and if we see like this was very poorly received by the community. We can use an example of that. It's something we did on TSW in going back to the Band-Aid thing. We released a system called the Aegis system, and we thought it was a good idea, and it definitely wasn't a good idea. And so we're abandoning it a bit with Super World Legends, but and people didn't like it, and they raged at us about it, and
it's the thing. It's not like it was it wasn't a bad idea. I think it was more like it's that Band-Aid. It's the fact that we were designed into a corner. We needed a new way to reward players in a system that was now closed. And for us, in that vacuum, it was like, this is the best that we can do. And this is good enough. And then, when you really sit, you realize, actually, no, that was not good enough. Like, we need to do something else. And because of those issues that we have with the design of some of the games that were so tight, this is again part of the revamp. Was like, we need to make sure we don't have those issues so that the game is future proof, both content and design wise. But one other thing I wanted to react just on the toxicity thing as well is the reason why we're doing this is because you have both sides. Like the comment from TCO just now is also nice. You get the people who are going to be supportive, so you always have I love working on MMOs because of that, because you are so close to the community and you get a chance to talk to them. Some people are nice, some people are not so nice, but no matter what, all of these people are your customers. They are entertained by your game, and you're dealing with their entertainment. So it's I know I have a tendency to focus too much on the negative. Like I'm the guy who's going to read everybody, all the trolls and all the thing that makes people unhappy, try to understand why and try to see how we can fix it. But one of the important thing I want to remind all designers as well is like it's impossible to please everybody, particularly in an MMO, and you need to be careful with this. Like someone might feel extremely upset about one idea that you had, something that you implemented, but you need to remember why you added this system, why you added this part of content, this quest, this story. What is the purpose of it in the game? And if the person being upset, is it because he didn't understand it? Is it a matter of education? Is it a matter of preference? And do people also like it? Maybe this content was not made like with that person in mind in particular, but you did something else for that person. So it's trying, like, even though you can't please everybody, you can do little bits of content who will please all of these people. And I think that's the uniqueness of working on an MMO. Is like, a lot of games, like if you're an FPS players, yes, you're going to play all the FPSs, and you might give a skip to RPGs and stuff like that. But MMOs, they try to cater to so many players. Like, people who are going to be role players, people who are going to be hardcore, people who are going to be casual, people who want to be immersed, people who want to be min-maxing. And it's trying to find the bit who's going to keep all of these people entertained into your game, and trying to find the core part that's going to make everybody happy. In our case, it's those settings, like the modern setting and the horror kind of genre.
Yeah, and let's not gloss over the other idiosyncrasies of TSW, I guess, Legends now, which is that it's been a while since I've done any quests, but I remember there being a bunch of puzzle solving. You would sort of root around in rooms and read books and look for sigils under desks and stuff, and there was a lot of involved storytelling that at the time I didn't see in any other massively multi-round games at all. So like I think we're running out of time here, unfortunately. But like, is that kind of quest design still a priority? And if so, like, how do you do that within the constraints of a giant ever living world like this?
It's not. I wouldn't say it's a priority. It's a part of the game. It's something actually interesting enough. Like I had to really fight for because it's such a unique part of the game. We did have like newer designers saying, okay, this is bad. Like people hate getting out of the game in order to find those answers. And it was something that I fought really hard of because it's a unique part of the game. And when I said like knowing your audience, we know those investigation missions are designed for the certain part of people. Like there is a lack. There's not many games who offer this. And we do. So it was important for me to say, no, we're definitely going to keep those investigation mission. They will force you to learn, the Morse code and to learn different languages sometimes. But there will be research and you learn something and you'll feel more clever once you finish that mission, if it's what you're looking for. Yeah. But again, our job is, we're making sure those missions are clearly defined. People are not going to go investigation mission. They have a different icon. We're telling you, hey, this is a mission where you're going to have to think. We also introduce this mission better. Like earlier it was like, hey, people will figure out what the yellow icon missions are. Now we kind of get you into it. We're saying like, we start with a very, very simple riddle. We give you a few clues in the game, but we tell you, hey, this is one of these missions where you're going to have to use your brain. We're not going to, give you a waypoint and just go there and your mission is going to solve. But yeah, this one is a design decision. Like we want to cater for those people. We know we have a lot of people who play the game really solely for this. So it's very important, but it's a fraction of the game. It's about like 20% of all of the stories are investigations.
Well, they're the only part that stood out to me. Not that the rest is bad. Just I'm with you. Like those are awesome. They were a good choice. I can see why you'd have to fight for them. Brian, I feel like once again I've just sort of rambled on. Do you have any pressing design questions you've been just eager to get out?
Yeah. I think. So we've talked about how you were rewarding player. You sort of made a lot of the free to play switch, and a lot of switches there happen with vanity items. Is there anything else you two can share about like lessons you've learned going from a paid model to a free-to-play model, and what do you think it means for like other live game designers who could learn from your experience?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it's accessibility. So when you have a subscription-based game, you sort of have those people. I'm trying to find a good word that. They've committed to your game, right? Mm-hmm. So they've either paid $60 for it or they're paying $15 a month. Mm-hmm. So they've made a financial investment and they are committed to your game and they're going to do extra work for it. However, if somebody can just click a link and download your game and play it, and the only work they need to do is just wait for it to download, it's going to be a lot harder to capture them because the first time they run into frustration, maybe they're like, it's the sunk cost fallacy, sort of, is that, well, I haven't spent anything on this. This is frustrating. I'm going to quit and go. So a lot of it is just looking at your introductions, your tutorials, your user experience, really, making sure that you're collecting the data on that, finding where the pain points are, finding when people are dropping off, and making sure you're adjusting for that. Because your audience is a lot easier to capture because it's free to play. So all they have to do is find out and be a little bit interested in it because they'll start playing it. It doesn't cost anything for them, but they're a lot harder to keep because there's so many other free to play games they could do, and they haven't spent any money on your game. So yeah, it's just analyzing the data and how your players are playing the game.
First impression.
Yeah. It's a very generic answer, I guess, but.
No, data's important. We love data. Data's the best. Best Star Trek character. So there's a lot of chat going on, but we're sort of running dry on questions here. There was one that I wanted to get to, but I think maybe it's too far back. Maybe we already answered this. I'm sorry. So Shadowm asked, have you, the devs, ever considered introducing a way to make leveling weapon types easier after maxing other weapons? And maybe we can talk in general, real quick, about how you balance that, like, I don't want to say grind, but that leveling progression for items and stuff.
Yeah, so there's, I mean, really the only balance at the moment is that the more powerful you are, the more powerful the items you can get are, which give you more experience. So then when you decide, say if you're a shotgun chaos player, and you get up to like the elite difficulty dungeons, the rewards you get from those are higher than what you would get if you ran like the level 110 dungeon here in Kingsmith Town Polaris. So you would level up stuff faster. However, yeah, we'll look at the balance of things, and we'll monitor how people are playing, how long it takes them to switch. You know, that's probably one of the big complaints right now is that you heavily invest in your current build. In order to switch to something else, you need to obviously heavily invest. So maybe there is some sort of system we can do.
We do want to incentivize people to try everything and to get everything out in all the weapons. So there's definitely a reason for us to try and make it easier for you to level up weapons after you've done one maxed out. Yeah, it's more of a question of time. I think for now they're really focused on the idea of having this long progression, these extra systems, like giving us this longevity that the game needed, so that we can focus on other combats and other innovations moving forward.
I wonder, as we wind down, you guys have both been at Funcom for a while. Funcom has a remarkable stable of long-lived MMO games. I think Anarchy Online, Age of Conan, Secret World. So, where do you think, given that experience, where do you think the future of online games is headed? It seems like, I'll be honest with you, I thought Secret World was already free to play, which is my bad. I hadn't checked in a while. So where do you think it's going? Is free to play just like the future guaranteed, or is there some maybe other way on the horizon you see coming up? What do you expect is going to happen the next couple of years?
I really think it depends on the game type. So, mobile games are more free to play, and games that are like that, I expect to continue being free to play. It's expensive to make an MMO though, and a lot of them fail. So I don't know how many publishers or how many developers are really going to sink the X million dollars it takes to make an MMO. Anymore. The WoW bubble has sort of burst, but yeah, I still think there's a future in the genre. Obviously, I feel free to play is, like I said earlier, it's easier to capture an audience. You have to do a little bit of extra work to keep them, but I feel it's a better business model.
It's hard. I mean, it's such a competitive world. There's a lot of MMOs out there, and I think it's wording it differently, but I think also in 2017 it's very clear that a lot of players' attention span is growing low, so they want to try those games. They want to see if they're going to like it first, and usually if you have kind of a monetization behind it, they're less likely to try it out. So unless you're a mammoth of a game and you're 100% sure that this is going to revolutionize everything and everybody will want to play it and subscribe, getting rid of that wall and allowing people to just come try a game and decide by yourself that yes, it's the best out there, and then you can commit to it. It's smarter.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. There's still a lot of good chat going on, but we are coming up on the end of our hour here. I hadn't even considered, almost every dev we talk to these days is real upfront about being scared about having their game get lost in the shuffle. No matter what it's about or how good it is, there's just so much stuff coming out, and there's so many demands for people's time that everyone's worried about it. And I hadn't really thought about online games like this. Do you guys? I know you put a lot of effort into the community, support it. Do you also put a lot of, or rather, do you see a lot of support from Twitch and YouTube? Is that a big vector for you, or not so much?
It's it is a priority for us to have streamers on Twitch. It's harder with an older game though. The big streamers. So you've got, and I don't know how long I want to get into this, but Twitch, you have your generalist Twitch streamers like Lyric or any of the huge ones that they just play whatever they stumble
What's
across.
the latest? And
Then you have people that are dedicated to a specific game, and that's all they play. Like the League of Legends streamers or etc. like that. So it's hard to attract either of those things with a game that originally came out in 2012. So, but I mean, we are working with Twitch, so we have some plans in the future. Hopefully, those will come out pretty soon. So, but yeah, Twitch and YouTube are still very important to us. But it's not our main marketing or to use like user acquisition avenue though.
Brian, are you shooting townies?
It is New England. Yeah.
What are you
That's
talking
pretty
about?
messed
I
up.
love the townies from my college town. They're great people.
I definitely just saw a townie with a red bar, and that red bar went down.
I
Cool.
plead the
Cool.
fifth.
So do you? First of all, can you go skating? Because I noticed Danny has gone skating, and I want to know if you can go with him.
It didn't give me a quest to. I just left his phone there so that he could, have his phone back. Which, funny enough, that's probably the most honest role-playing moment I've ever felt, because whenever I find a lost phone, I also do my best to get it back to the owner.
That's right. Yeah.
Aw,
You're a good citizen.
Yeah.
you're a good man, Brian
There's a
Francis.
hoverboard you could go skate with Danny with. So.
Oh,
Ooh.
cool.
there's a skate park. You'll find him at the skate park. So he really is gone skating. And you get several mounts that you can get in the game. So we have a big part of the game which is about customization. As you can see, we talked about making your class, everything, but there's a lot about making your character look the way you want them to look. We have over 6,000 pieces of clothes that the player can choose to really dress your character up. And we also have the same thing with the way you sprint. You can change your sprint animation, or you can use mounts. You'll be able also to use overboards and jetpacks and stuff like this. So we have a lot of things we're trying to focus on this like the vanity aspect of the game is also big, and in an MMO it's something which is very important. People want to feel like they are special and they are unique. Not everybody looks the same, so it's a big part of the game too.
Yeah.
Nice.
Well, with that, I guess it's a good time to start wrapping things up. You have been listening to the Gamasutra Twitch channel. It's not the Gamasutra Switch channel yet. Although I'm sure when the Secret
today.
World is inevitably ported to the Switch,
Sure. Yeah.
that's not an announcement. That's me joshing.
You heard it first.
Motion controls.
Yeah. I hope. Sorry. I'll just start over. This has been the Gamasutra Twitch channel. We appreciate. Thank you all from the Secret World community for tuning in. We hope you've enjoyed this chat with the developers. If you have any aspirations of getting into game development yourself, or you are a game developer, we would love it if you would follow the Gamasutra Twitch channel, because we are always interviewing game developers to learn about their work. We are holding roundtables to talk about the future of the business. And we're just, we like checking out cool games, interesting games, and the Secret World is definitely one of the more interesting MMOs that I've checked out in a while. I have been Brian Francis, contributing editor. Scott, where can they contact you guys if they have any questions that they're some of the stuff about in the chat? I'm assuming you have forums and Reddit.
Yeah, so our Reddit is Secret World Legends. We have a Discord channel also. I'm sure you can find that somewhere. I think it's on the launcher.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then we are at secretworldlegends.com. It's free to play. You can download it. Come join us.
Cool.
Yeah, Twitter as well. Secret World LGDS is the handle if you wanna find us there.
Cool.
You can talk to me directly if you want at Romain Amiel. I'll give myself a little.
And we launch on Steam on Monday, so
Yes.
we'll have Steam forums also.
Sweet.
that you can.
Ooh.
Check it out on Steam. Get those sweet Steam achievements. Okay.
That's right.
Thank you all for joining us, and have a nice day.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you guys.
Bye. Secret goodbye.